we're diving into the story of the 1995 Washington quarter-dollar coin, specifically in bad or heavily circulated condition. You might think a scratched, worn-out quarter from 1995 isn't worth much, and in most cases you'd be right. But as with many coins, there's more to the story than just the date on the front. The Washington quarter was originally introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Over the decades, the design became one of the most recognizable in U.S. coinage. By 1995, the Washington quarter had been circulating for over 60 years, and the Denver Mint played a major role in producing them. The 1995 D quarter was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why you'll see a small D mint mark on the right side of Washington's ponytail on the coin's obverse. In 1995, over 1.1 billion Washington quarters were minted in Denver alone. That's right, more than 1.1 billion. This high mintage means that 1995 D quarters are generally very common. Most of them were used in everyday transactions and have seen decades of wear and tear. So, what does that mean for value? In heavily circulated or bad condition, the 1995 D Washington quarter is typically worth only face value, 25 cents. If the coin has scratches, loss of detail, discoloration, or signs of heavy use, it unfortunately holds no extra value for most collectors. However, there are a few important exceptions. Some 1995 D quarters contain minting errors, and those can be worth significantly more. Error coins are highly sought after in the numismatic world because they represent mistakes that slipped through the minting process. For example, some 1995 D quarters may exhibit doubling. This is known as a double die error. You'd typically look at areas like the words "Liberty," "In God We Trust," or the date 1995. If there's noticeable doubling in any of those areas, the coin could be worth $10, $50, or even more depending on the severity of the error and the condition. Another error to watch for is the off-center strike. This happens when the coin is not properly aligned in the press and is struck off-center. A small off-center error might not add much value, but a more dramatic one, say 10% to 30% off-center, can easily push the value into the $20 to $100 range, even in bad condition. Also, be on the lookout for clipped planchets, die cracks, cuds, or misaligned dies. These are rare, but they do exist, and collectors pay good money for them, even if the rest of the coin is worn. Now let's clear up a common misconception. Some people think their 1995 D quarter might be silver. But here's the truth. Quarters minted from 1965 onward are made from a copper nickel-clad composition, not silver. So, unless the coin is a special minting error on a silver planchet, which would be extremely rare, it doesn't have any silver melt value. If you want silver quarters, you'll need to look for coins dated 1964 or earlier. To sum it up, the 1995 D Washington quarter in bad condition is usually worth only 25 cents. It's one of the most common modern quarters due to its massive mintage. However, if your coin has a mint error, like a double die, off-center strike, or a clipped planchet, it could still be worth significantly more, even if it's heavily worn. So before you toss that old quarter in your change jar, take a closer look. A magnifying glass and a few extra seconds might be all it takes to spot a valuable variety hiding in plain sight. Next up, we're going to take a closer look at the 1968 Washington quarter-dollar coin, especially when it's in bad condition. Many people wonder if their older pocket change might have hidden value, even if it's scratched, worn down, or heavily circulated. So, let's explore the history, production, and potential value of the 1968 quarter. The Washington quarter was first issued in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. It was intended to be a one-year commemorative coin, but due to its popularity, the design became the permanent replacement for the standing Liberty quarter. For decades, the obverse of the coin has featured a profile of George Washington, and the reverse showed an eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows, with olive branches beneath, symbolizing both strength and peace. The year 1968 marked a significant shift in American coin production. Just 3 years earlier, in 1965, the U.S. Mint had removed silver from circulating dimes and quarters due to rising silver prices and coin hoarding. Prior to that, quarters were made of 90% silver. But starting in 1965, including the 1968 quarter, the U.S. Mint switched to a copper-nickel-clad composition. That means the 1968 Washington quarter has no silver content and is made with an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a core of pure copper. In 1968, Washington quarters were minted at 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and for the first time in many years, San Francisco. However, there's a key difference in the 1968 quarters. They were only made as proof coins for collectors and not meant for circulation. If you happen to have a 1968 proof quarter, it would likely have a mirrored surface and sharp details. But in bad condition, it's unlikely you have one of these unless it was removed from a set and damaged. Most 1968 quarters found in circulation will have either a D mint mark for Denver or no mint mark at all, indicating Philadelphia. Over 101 million quarters were struck at the Denver Mint, while the Philadelphia Mint struck over 220 million coins. That means the 1968 quarter is fairly common, especially if it's been circulated for decades and shows heavy signs of wear. Now let's talk about value. If your 1968 Washington quarter is in bad condition, meaning it has significant wear, scratches, nicks, or discoloration, it will generally be worth only its face value of 25 cents. These coins were produced in large numbers and without silver content or collectible quality. Worn examples are not rare. However, there are always a few exceptions that can make even a bad condition coin worth more than you'd expect. One thing to watch out for is mint errors. While not extremely common, some 1968 quarters may have striking mistakes that slipped through quality control. These can include off-center strikes, die cracks, clipped planchets, or double die obverses. Even in bad condition, error coins can fetch prices ranging from $10 to over $100, depending on how dramatic and rare the error is. For example, a minor off-center strike might sell for a few dollars, while a noticeable die break or doubled die could bring in much more from collectors interested in unique pieces. Another factor to consider is if your 1968 quarter, somehow, ended up struck on the wrong planchet, like a nickel or a foreign coin blank. These extremely rare minting anomalies are highly sought after and can be valuable even if the coin looks worn out. It's always worth taking a second look with a magnifier or having a professional evaluate your coin if you suspect something unusual. To be clear, the vast majority of 1968 quarters in circulation today have no special errors and no silver content. So unless yours has a unique minting anomaly or comes from a proof set, a heavily worn 1968 quarter is almost always worth just 25 cents. But for coin collectors, it's not always about high value. It's also about the story behind each coin, the history it represents, and the thrill of discovering something rare in your pocket change. Next up, today, we're taking a closer look at a fascinating coin that many people overlook, the 1982 D Washington quarter dollar. This quarter might seem like just another piece of everyday change, but when we dig into the history and value, we uncover some surprising facts, especially considering what was happening with U.S. coin production in the early 1980s. The Washington quarter design has been a fixture of American coinage since 1932, originally issued to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The obverse features a left-facing portrait of Washington, designed by John Flanagan, and the reverse shows an eagle with wings spread, standing on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below, a symbol of peace, backed by strength. This classic design was used all the way until the state quarters began in 1999. Now, the year 1982 was a turning point for the U.S. Mint. Due to budget cuts and inflation, the Mint made some unusual decisions that year. One of the most significant was that they stopped producing uncirculated mint sets entirely, meaning no mint sets were sold to the public for either 1982 or 1983. Because of that, collectors today find it much harder to locate high-grade examples of 1982 coins, especially the quarters. Most of the coins that exist from those 2 years are circulated examples, used in everyday commerce and now heavily worn. The 1982 D Washington quarter was struck at the Denver Mint, as indicated by the small D mint mark, located on the right side of Washington's ponytail. The Denver Mint produced over 480 million of these quarters, so by numbers alone, they're not rare. But because of the lack of mint sets and how few people save them in pristine condition, uncirculated or high-grade examples are actually much more valuable than you'd expect. Let's talk about the coin's composition. Like all quarters minted, after 1964, the 1982 D is made of a copper nickel clad, a layer of copper sandwiched between layers of nickel. There's no silver in this coin, so it doesn't have intrinsic metal value. However, what it does have is collector interest, particularly if the coin is in great shape or has a notable error. Now let's talk about value. In bad condition, or heavy circulation, a 1982 D Washington quarter is generally worth just its face value of 25 cents. These are the coins you'll find in pocket change, scratched, worn, and showing signs of decades of use. But if the coin is in uncirculated condition or near mint state, it could be worth anywhere from $5 to $25 and possibly even more depending on the grade. Mint state 65 and higher examples can sell for $50 or more, especially if they have strong strikes and no flaws. Why? Again, it all comes back to the fact that so few were saved in pristine condition. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Some 1982 D quarters have minting errors that make them stand out. One of the most famous is the No mint mark 1982 P quarter, which was actually struck in Philadelphia, but the Denver version has its own collectible quirks. Keep an eye out for coins with die breaks, off-center strikes, or even weak strikes, which can all add to a coin's value. Another interesting variety to look for is the small date versus large date design on the 1982 cents, which reflects how the mint was experimenting that year. While the 1982 D quarter doesn't have different types like the penny, the general instability in minting that year makes errors more common across denominations. So what should you look for if you have a 1982 D quarter? First, check the overall condition. Is it heavily worn with faded details? If so, it's likely worth only 25 cents. But if it has sharp features, good luster, and minimal wear, you might have something more valuable. Second, check for any oddities, double lettering, off-center strikes, or strange markings. Even small errors can increase a coin's value, especially for a year like 1982 when quality control was more unpredictable. To summarize, the 1982 D Washington quarter is a common coin in circulation, but thanks to the lack of mint sets that year, uncirculated examples are significant. Taking a closer look at a coin that may seem ordinary but has its own unique story to tell, the 1942 Lincoln wheat penny. Even in bad condition, this humble coin carries history from a significant time in the world. Let's dive into its background, details, and current value in the coin market. The 1942 Lincoln wheat penny was struck during one of the most important periods in modern history, World War II. While the war was being fought overseas, the United States Mint continued producing millions of pennies for everyday transactions back home. The penny from 1942 is part of the famous Lincoln Wheat series, which was introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the coin features Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and 2 wheat ears on the reverse, symbolizing prosperity and the backbone of American agriculture. In 1942, The United States Mint produced Lincoln wheat pennies at 3 different facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia coins have no mint mark, while the Denver coins are marked with a D and the San Francisco coins with an S. Combined, over 950 million Lincoln wheat pennies were minted that year, making the 1942 issue very common. Here's a quick breakdown. Philadelphia minted about 657 million coins, Denver produced roughly 206 million, and San Francisco contributed around 85 million. With such high mintages, most 1942 pennies, especially in circulated or poor condition, are not considered rare by collectors. Now let's talk about the physical features. The coin is made from 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, which gives it a reddish-brown or brown tone depending on how it has aged or been stored. It weighs 3.11 grams and has a diameter of 19 millimeters. Over time, exposure to the elements can cause the coin to develop discoloration, corrosion, or even surface damage, especially if it hasn't been preserved properly. These factors greatly affect its market value. So what is a 1942 Lincoln wheat penny worth in bad or poor condition? Today, for coins that are heavily worn, scratched, or discolored, what we would classify as low-grade or circulated condition, the value typically ranges from about 2 cents to 10 cents. Yes, that's just slightly more than face value. And in most cases, these coins are collected in bulk or used for educational purposes or starter coin collections. However, if your 1942 penny has unusual features, such as a misstrike, double die error, off-center strike, or even remnants of a repunched mint mark, its value could be significantly higher even if the coin is in bad shape. Some error coins from this year have sold for $50 to several $100s, depending on the severity and uniqueness of the error. While most 1942 wheat pennies in poor condition won't make you rich, they are still historically valuable. They were produced at a time when the United States was gearing up for total war, when copper was in high demand for ammunition and military equipment, and when the mint was about to experiment with steel coinage in the following year, 1943. That makes the 1942 penny a kind of last chapter for traditional copper coinage before the wartime changes that came next. In summary, the 1942 Lincoln wheat penny is a common coin from a pivotal time in American history. If yours is in bad condition, its value is modest, usually just a few cents. But its real worth lies in the story it tells, the era it represents, and the lessons it holds for collectors, historians, and everyday people alike. So before you toss that old coin aside, take a moment to appreciate its journey through time. Next up, the 1955 Lincoln wheat penny. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned collector, the 1955 penny has a lot to offer, especially if you have one in fine condition. Let's take a deep look into its fascinating background, design, and current value in the coin market. The 1955 Lincoln wheat penny is part of the beloved wheat cent series that ran from 1909 to 1958. This series was created to honor President Abraham Lincoln and became the first regular issue U.S. coin to feature a real person. The obverse of the 1955 penny features Lincoln's portrait, designed by Victor David Brenner, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, Liberty on the left, and the date 1955 on the right. The reverse shows 2 wheat stalks, curving inward, symbolizing abundance, with the words 1 cent and United States of America boldly in the center, along with the motto E pluribus unum at the top. In 1955, the Lincoln wheat penny was struck at 2 mints, Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia Mint produced the coins with no mint mark, while the Denver Mint added a small D below the date. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 330 million pennies, and the Denver Mint produced more than 563 million. These high mintages mean that regular 1955 Lincoln wheat pennies are not considered rare, especially in circulated condition. Now, Let's focus on what a 1955 Lincoln wheat penny is worth today in fine condition. A coin in fine grade typically shows moderate wear, but all major details are still visible. Lincoln's facial features may be slightly worn, and the wheat stalks on the back will be partially faded but still outlined. In this condition, a regular 1955 penny from Philadelphia is usually valued between 15 to 30 cents. A 1955 D penny in fine condition falls within a similar range, about 10 to 25 cents depending on the market. However, when we talk about the 1955 penny, we cannot ignore one of the most famous error coins in American numismatics, the 1955 doubled die obverse. In this rare variation, the date, liberty, and in God we trust appear noticeably doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. Fewer than 24,000 of these doubled die errors made it into circulation, and they quickly became a sensation among collectors. If you happen to have a 1955 doubled die penny, even in circulated condition, it could be worth $1,000 to over $2,000. In higher grades, some examples have sold for $10,000 or more. But keep in mind, many counterfeits exist, so authentication by a reputable coin grading service like PCGS or NGC is essential before you place a value on a coin that appears to have doubling. Back to the regular 1955 penny. While its monetary value may be modest in fine condition, its historical significance is still strong. This coin was minted during a peaceful yet transformative era in the United States, the mid-1950s. The nation was experiencing post-war growth, and coins like the 1955 wheat penny were part of everyday life. Millions of these pennies circulated through the hands of American workers, students, and soldiers, and each one carries a small piece of that mid-century history. The Lincoln Wheat Penny series would come to an end just 3 years later in 1958, making the 1955 issue one of the last in the classic design. That adds a layer of nostalgia and collectability, even for examples that show signs of wear. So, to sum it all up, a 1955 Lincoln Wheat Penny in fine condition is a common and affordable coin, typically worth less than $1. But its connection to American history, its role in one of the most famous coin errors ever, and its place near the end of a historic series make it a coin worth appreciating. It's a great piece for collectors who enjoy the story behind every cent. Next up, we're diving into a coin that might be sitting quietly in your change jar, but it holds a powerful connection to a turning point in world history, the 1945 D Lincoln Wheat Penny. Even in worn condition, this small copper coin carries an incredible story from the final days of World War II. Let's take a closer look at the history, design, and value of the 1945 D penny, especially for those that have seen better days. The Lincoln Wheat Penny was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, this was the first American coin to feature a real person instead of symbolic figures like Liberty. On the obverse, or front of the coin, you'll find a right-facing profile of President Lincoln, the word Liberty on the left side, the date 1945 on the right, and the familiar motto, "In God We Trust," above his head. The reverse of the coin features two stylized wheat ears arching along the edges with the words 1 cent, United States of America, and the motto E pluribus unum across the top. Now, let's get specific about the 1945 D penny. The D mint mark below the date tells us it was minted at the Denver Mint. In 1945, over 266 million Lincoln wheat pennies were struck at the Denver facility. That means the 1945 D penny is not rare in terms of quantity, but don't let that fool you. Every coin tells a story, and this one is no different. Think about where the United States was in 1945. The Second World War was drawing to a close. Victory in Europe was declared in May, and by August, the war with Japan had ended. On the home front, the economy was transitioning from wartime production back to peacetime life. Despite resource shortages, the U.S. Mint continued producing coins, including the 1945 D wheat penny, using the standard bronze alloy, 95% copper, and 5% tin and zinc. Because of their age and the fact that they were heavily circulated, most 1945 D Lincoln wheat pennies you'll find today are in worn or low-grade condition. These coins have usually lost a lot of their original sharpness. Lincoln's hair and cheek details are often smooth. On the reverse, the wheat stalks might be faded or nearly flat, and the rims may be worn into the design. In this condition, what collectors call good or about good, the coin's value is modest. So, how much is a worn 1945 D wheat penny worth today? In most cases, these coins sell for between 3 to 10 cents, just slightly more than their face value. That's because they're common and not rare unless in uncirculated or mint condition. However, collectors still enjoy adding them to a complete wheat penny set, especially if they're collecting by date and mint mark. If your 1945 D penny has unusual characteristics, such as an error coin with an off-center strike, a die crack, or a repunched mint mark, then its value could be significantly higher, even if it's worn. Some of these error coins have been known to sell for $20 to $100 or more, depending on the rarity and visibility of the error. So it's always worth giving your coin a second look or having it checked by a knowledgeable coin dealer. What really makes the 1945 D penny special is the time it represents. It circulated during the final months of a global conflict through the hands of workers, soldiers, and families. It may have helped buy a newspaper announcing the end of the war or a cup of coffee for a returning GI. The coin's wear and tear isn't just damage, it's history. So even though the monetary value of a worn 1945 D wheat penny is small, the historical value is rich. It represents a period of transformation, endurance, and hope. And for collectors, it's a piece of American heritage worth holding on to. Next up, the 1958 Lincoln wheat penny. This little copper coin may look worn, scratched, or even forgotten at the bottom of a coin jar, but it has an important story to tell. If you've found a 1958 wheat penny in bad condition, stick around, because we're about to uncover its fascinating history and see what it might be worth today. The Lincoln wheat penny was first introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, this coin broke tradition by becoming the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure, rather than a symbolic one like Lady Liberty. On the front, or obverse, you'll find Lincoln's portrait facing right, the word Liberty to the left, the year 1958 to the right, and the national motto, In God We Trust, running across the top. On the reverse, you'll see two wheat stalks arching along each side, surrounding the bold words 1 cent and United States of America. The Latin motto, E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one, appears at the top. This reverse design gave the coin its nickname, the wheat penny. Now let's talk about 1958 in particular. This was a milestone year because it was the final year the U.S. Mint produced the Lincoln wheat penny. Starting in 1959, the wheat reverse was replaced with the Lincoln Memorial design to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. So, the 1958 penny represents the very last chapter in nearly 50 years of wheat cent history. The 1958 Lincoln wheat penny was struck at two different mints, Philadelphia, which produced coins without a mint mark, and Denver, which placed a small D below the date. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 252 million coins that year, while the Denver Mint struck more than 800 million. Combined, that's over 1 billion 1958 wheat pennies. Because of this high mintage, the 1958 penny is considered common among collectors, especially in worn or circulated condition. Now, let's get into the value of a 1958 wheat penny in bad condition. When we say bad condition, we're referring to coins that are heavily circulated. These pennies often have lots of wear, making the finer details hard to see. Lincoln's hair and coat may be smooth and flat. The rims might be faded or merged with the fields of the coin. The reverse could show almost no detail on the wheat stalks. In this kind of worn condition, a 1958 wheat penny generally has a value of 1 to 3 cents. That's just above its face value. So, from a financial standpoint, it may not seem very impressive. But there's more to a coin's worth than just money. Even in poor condition, a 1958 wheat penny holds historical significance. It was minted during the post-war boom in America, a time of great optimism, industrial growth, and major cultural change. Think about it. A penny from 1958 could have been used to buy candy from a corner store, pay a parking meter, or even rest in someone's pocket during a big life moment. That kind of historical connection can make a simple coin feel like a time capsule. Now, one exception to keep in mind is the 1958 double-die obverse penny. This is a rare and extremely valuable error coin in which the date and lettering on the front appear clearly doubled. Only a few examples are known to exist, and they're considered some of the most sought-after Lincoln cents ever made. Even in circulated condition, one of these rare double-die pennies can sell for thousands of dollars. If you think you might have one, it's worth getting it authenticated by a reputable grading company like PCGS or NGC. But for most 1958 wheat pennies, especially those in bad shape, the value is modest. Still, these coins are great for beginning collectors, school projects, or anyone interested in U.S. history. They're also a fun reminder that sometimes the most ordinary-looking coins have stories worth remembering.